All right. Hello. My name is Jay Gallagher, and for my video project, I chose to concentrate on the life and career of a great icon, Bob Dylan. So, in his early life, he was born Robert Allen Zimmerman on May 24th, 1941, in Duluth, Minnesota. He was first exposed to music over the radio as a child. He tended to listen to blues and country stations. But as a teen, he got into rock and roll, starting a number of bands in his high school. While attending the University of in Minnesota, he began performing folk and country songs at local cafes, where he decided taking on the name Bob Dylan. In 1960 in Denver, he met bluesman Jesse Fuller, the inspiration behind his iconic the songwriter's signature harmonica rack and guitar. Later that year, he ended up dropping out of college, and he cites some of his earliest influences, being Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Little Richard. Going to New York in 1961, he traveled to New York City to perform there and to visit his music idol, Woody Guthrie. He immediately made a substantial impression on the folk community in Greenwich Village at the time. And Dylan began performing in coffee houses in the area, and his rough charisma won him a significant following. He began writing songs at an alarming rate during this period, where then signed with John Hammond of Columbia Records in 1961. Hammond produced Dylan's debut album in March of 1960. It was a collection of folk and blues standards, and the album only had 2 original songs written by Dylan on it. In his early career, he released a second album in 1963, Free Willin' Bob Dylan. It was all original songs and made a huge impact in the U.S. Folk community, and many performers began covering songs from that album, including "Blowin' in the Wind" and "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall." His next album, Times That Are Changin', firmly established Dylan as the definitive songwriter 1960s, the protest movements. Well, also, humor was an important part of Dylan's persona. George Harrison of the Beatles said about the Free Will and Bob Dylan, we just played it, just wore it out. Contents, the song lyrics, and just the attitude. It was incredibly original and wonderful. Going electric. In 1965, Dylan scandalized many of his folk fans by recording his first half-acoustic, half-electric album, Bringing It All Back Home, backed by a 9-piece band. The second side contained 4 long songs in which Dylan accompanied himself on acoustic guitar and harmonica. Mr. Tambourine Man became one of his best-known songs when the Byrds recorded an electric version that reached number 1 in the US and the UK. Also from the album, Bringing It All Back Home. And the songs, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, and It's All Right Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, were 2 of Dylan's most important compositions. At the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, Dylan was booed off the stage by folk fans he had alienated by appearing with an electric guitar. His next step, in 1965, Dylan wrote his most prolific song, Like a Rollin' Stone, which peaked at number 2 in the US charts. Following a near-fatal motorcycle accident in July 1966, Dylan spent almost a year recovering in seclusion. Dylan's biographers have written that the crash offered him a chance to escape the pressures around him. In 1973, Dylan appeared in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, a feature film directed by Sam Peckinpah. He also wrote this film soundtrack, which became a hit and included his now classic song, knocking on heaven's door. And his return to touring. In 1973, Dylan began his first full-scale tour since his accident, embarking on a sold-out nationwide tour with his longtime backup band, The Band. Dylan began reinventing himself, declaring in 1979 that he was born-again Christian, as opposed to his Jewish upbringing. Slow Train Comin' was a commercial hit, album coming out in 1979, winning Dylan his first Grammy Award. Beginning in the 1980s, he began touring full-time, going on tour with fellow legends Tom Petty, the Heartbreakers, and the Grateful Dead. His career continued to bloom. He was fully established as a rock and roll icon. Coming to a conclusion, Bob Dylan's influence in popular music is incalculable. As a songwriter, he pioneered several different schools of pop songwriting, from confessional singing songwriter to winding, hallucinatory, stream of consciousness narratives. As a vocalist, he broke down the notion that a singer must have a conventionally good voice in order to perform, thereby redefining the vocalist's role in popular music. As a musician, he sparked several genres of pop music, including electrified folk rock and country rock. That's just the tip of his achievements. Can't begin to understand the icon and the influence that was Bob Dylan. And thank you very much.